All righty, everyone. I just want to wish everybody a good afternoon and welcome everybody to our next fireside chat in our series of webinars. We are happy to continue bringing experts in various fields with different information to all of you as we continue working through these difficult and challenging times. And I am Frank Niesenbaum, VP of Sales for E2B Tech, and I'll be your host today. And I'm happy to welcome John Parisi, who is the Alliance Manager with AvidXchange. John will be discussing with us and giving us his insight about how businesses are solving our critical gaps in business continuity plans. And our goal in this continues to be providing information to help you all navigate your businesses through these unique times, as well as come out on the other side stronger than ever. I hope everyone enjoys the warmth of the fire pit behind me. We've transitioned from fireplaces now that we're in spring and actually even warmer weather. John is joining us without his video, but will be showing us his handsome picture throughout the presentation as well, kind of going back to the previous pre-COVID times. And we know everyone's working differently, but we all remain confident that as things start opening up, we'll get through this and get back on a really vibrant path. So again, welcome, John. Looking forward to chatting with you today.
Thank you. Look forward to it as well.
Okay, so we're going to start briefly with a couple of poll questions. We like to get a pulse about the audience that is joining us. So the first one is to ask how long before you plan on going back into the office. So a couple of choices there, up to 14 days, 15 to 30, just to get a gauge of where everybody thinks they're going to be.
It's interesting seeing what numbers are coming in at.
Yeah, there's a lot of range in there, I see.
Yeah, we're seeing what looks like about 50% don't plan to come back for another few months.
Yeah. I'm guessing part of that has to do with what state everybody is in as well.
Yep.
Here in Ohio, it's a little different. We'll just give them another minute. We've got just about everybody in there.
Yeah, we're seeing like one person so far coming back in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I know even here at AvidXchange, it's voluntary. As of right now, we started about 2 weeks ago. Some people wanted to return back to the office, and it was all voluntary. I think we only have maybe 20, 30 folks throughout all of our offices that decided to come back. And there's no plans in the immediate future to open up the office.
We're working through it as well. Okay, well, that was helpful. I think we've got most everybody that was going to answered. Let's move to the second question. And the second question, a little different, along the lines of, did you or do you have a continuity plan in place that is helping you manage a crisis like we're experiencing today? Yes or no? Pretty easy to answer. Again, I think it's going to be mixed. It's kind of nice to see that it seems like there were quite a few, John, that did have plans in place.
They did. Be interesting to hear how those plans are working. I know we had a continuity plan in place, but obviously nothing set for what we're experiencing these last few months.
Yeah, that's the crazy part.
Yeah, I mean, what I've been hearing as we're speaking to customers, they'll have their business continuity plans. It'll be across the entire spectrum.
Yeah, it's something
Some
different.
are working out fine. Other ones, they know they have to revive them.
Yeah. We're almost there.
Frank, did E2B
a little
have
more
one?
did than didn't.
Yep. Yeah, about 60% of the folks on the call today had a plan in place, which is good news.
Yeah, it's very good.
Frank, did E2B have a plan?
Yeah, I think we were prepared in that, in our industry, obviously a lot of people are remote already, consultants, people like that, and you would know that in our industry. So that was a little easier, and some, are not even in the state of Ohio. But so we were prepared from that standpoint. I think early on we were ready with cleaning and keeping things that way. So, I don't know that we had a formal contingency plan, but we've had continuity plans in place to deal with things like this, I think.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm sure you did as well.
Yeah, we did. I mean, our plans, it was different, and obviously it's more in depth now as far as the type of plans now that we open the offices on a volunteer basis,
Yep.
but there's a lot more guidelines that we've put in place, such as if you want to have a meeting in the meeting room, those meeting rooms are now only 50% occupancies, taking everything out of all the break rooms, I think when this first started, we did a big, massive cleaning throughout the entire building.
Yeah, that's the big thing, right?
All the high touch areas to everyone's desks. So
right.
We did that right from the start.
That's awesome. Well, thanks everybody. That's helpful information. Gives us some good background about the audience in general. So John, I wanted to kind of jump into things, and hopefully everybody's enjoying their lunch, complimentary lunch, and is ready for some valuable information to help as we work through this. So the first thing I would say, John, can you, speak a little bit or talk a little bit about what you've been seeing? I mean, we kind of hinted at a little bit here, but in terms of what you're seeing around the industry, in terms of continuity plans and the impact, and I believe you guys have done some research on the topic. So I'm curious as to what you saw or heard or what you're seeing out in the market, in the industry.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have done some research. This is actually a topic we wanted to cover for some time now. It's really been a challenging experience for all of us, and we like to share some of the experiences from not only from the perspective of AvidXchange, but also from the experience from some of our customers as well. What we're seeing to come out of this is really some best practices truly are evolving over the past 3 to 4 months. We did, like Frank was saying, we did some great research, and what we found really was startling. We found that there was almost about a third of the companies had an insufficient business continuity plan in place. And what we mean by a business continuity plan is relatively simple. It's basically, do you have the ability to continue your operations like you had prior to COVID-19? Think about that. That only goes back to January. But a third of these companies didn't have even the basics to keep their operations going. We are also seeing that about the same number of companies that have multiple locations, these are probably more progressive companies that had a business continuity plan in place across multiple locations, still having issues. They may have operations, say, on the East Coast and another operation on the West Coast,
Right.
And the reason they did this, if there was a natural disaster that took place, their mindset was they thought they could funnel the operations from one location to the other. What they didn't account for was, no one was able to conceive that what we're experiencing today, that entire cities, entire states,
Right.
the entire continent, right?
Yeah.
Really, the entire world shutting down at the same time. I don't think there was a business continuity plan in place, especially in the small and mid-market space, maybe in the enterprise space. If you talk to some of the larger Fortune 100 companies, they may have business continuity in place for pandemics like we're going through now, but you can almost be assured that an SMB type of customer did not have a business continuity in place to really take effect for what we're seeing in these last 3 months.
Right.
Right. And then finally, what we're seeing is that about 1 in 5 companies, they really could only sustain their business for around 2 months. That's really the situation we're in today, if you think about it. It's really the heart of this issue. Many of these business continuity plans, they're really reaching that critical tipping point for many organizations. They had a plan that could get them through for about 2 or 3 months.
Right.
We're at that edge of where those plans were going to be affected. It's really that these issues are not only for these 500 companies that we spoke with. It's really for organizations throughout the U.S. All organizations, no matter what size, are dealing with, obviously, what we're going through with this pandemic.
Right. Yeah, I would concur. I mean, we've seen it too. We didn't do that kind of research, but I mean, who would have imagined that it was a worldwide situation versus
no one
localized
thought
to a state or a country or whatever. Globally, that's incredible, and it has had an effect. I mean, we see it in our clients and prospects that some have been in business, whether you're essential or you're not, but you still had to deal with it. So the statistics are interesting, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's
yeah, they were really enlightening to us as far as how many companies that we work with, and then just in general, as far as they thought they had a plan in place, and it just wasn't deep enough and strong enough to sustain.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think along those lines, as we're talking about the plans that, I'm sure different people, different organizations had different plans in place, and as we talked about and what they were planning to do. But, once upon a time, everything was manual. And now, the last 10 years, obviously, there's a lot more technology. I laugh and think about what these webinars would have been like without, Zoom or Teams or whatever tools we have that let us connect like this, which we all use now anyway. But talk about manual processes, what the companies that had a plan based on manual processes, what do you see as the biggest challenges that they face? I mean, what are they dealing with?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that many organizations now are seeing is that they're just not prepared to be 100% mobile. When you have a office-based operation and it needs to become mobile, when you think about it, every aspect of their business is going to be tested to see what's going to be effective and what's not going to be effective. We found that many business plans are going to be underserving you if you created it a number of years ago compared to developing one for the current crisis that we're in. It could be how you decide to communicate and collaborate internally with your employees. How are you thinking about, desktop enablement and deployment, and certainly any business process in general you have to take another look at. Whenever there's a manual process that really requires a person to get back into the office, that really will not be resilient enough for the current situations that we're finding ourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
There's issues that not only will grow, but we'll talk about manual process around that AP space. We found that about a third of organizations pre-COVID, they just didn't have the basic technology to allow their teammates to work from home. They're still dealing with pushing the paper invoices, and then there's all the issues around, paper invoices in general. Just imagine if you can't leave your home any longer. You can't collect the mail, therefore you can't process those invoices, and on the back end you can't make those payments.
Right.
Right? If you could send invoices out, say you had the luxury where you can't send invoices out. The flip side is the receipt of those invoices, they're still getting bottlenecked and they're still getting blocked. Those invoices are getting received, they're sitting in probably some office building, they're sitting in a mailbox, a mail room, and with that, the ability to make payments against them is almost impossible.
Right.
The only way you could do it is sending someone in to basically retrieve those invoices and see if you can make those payments. So, if you don't get to those invoices to make those payments, the supplier on the back end of those receivables, they can't get paid. So think about it. Even with what we're going through the pandemic, we're even seeing a slowness in the U.S. mail service. You know, things are getting bottlenecked even at that level. So there's just, because you have all these manual processes in place, it's so much harder to make your payments to your suppliers that you're relying on for your own business continuity plans. You know, there's other challenges in place as well. You know, think about the equipment for all your home workers. Right. You know, so they could be as efficient at home as they were in the office. You know, you don't have, most of these employees, they don't have a office setup in their home. So, you know, how do you keep them working as efficiently as they were when they were in the office? Mm-hmm. Right. You know, and then secondly is, how do you keep your employees engaged? That's a really big thing when you're moving your entire workforce from a office environment to a home environment. That's something we didn't have to think about just 4 months ago. You know, right. Majority of the employees worked in an office. I know at AvidXchange, of our 1,400 employees, we probably only have a couple hundred that truly are remote workers. Everyone else is in one of our 7 corporate offices throughout the U.S., and I'm sure that's the same for, Frank, for you with E2B.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the same situation for us to some degree. And again, I joked about at the beginning of this topic in that, you know, 10 years ago, how were we connecting? You know, it was phones and yeah, cell phones and other things that we did, but we weren't connected like we are with Zoom or like what we're doing today, where we're sharing information live and it could be around the world. And you're right, technology's there, but were companies ready with those subscriptions or people having access to it? We're seeing it. And it's interesting you mentioned receivables, because we did a similar live webinar last week or a couple of weeks ago about that side of the business, where here we're focusing on IP without getting people paid, and without getting paid, how do you run your business, especially in these times? So that your tips and your conversation are very timely and important. And so now we kind of started to talk about technology, and I see you kind of put that up there. But talking about technology and obviously a pandemic, again, worldwide pandemic, you know, why do you think there is such a technology gap? And what are the biggest hurdles that these businesses have had to overcome? I know what we've gone through, and we've actually done well here at E2B and kept in business, you know, being essential to supporting our customers. But I know there are hurdles and tough things that have gone on. So I'm curious as to what you've seen in terms of your research.
Yeah, as far as what we've seen, as far as the technology gap, and we experienced it personally here at AvidXchange. What we saw when we did this research with those 500 companies, that a little over of about a third of the business stated that they had the right technology in place to allow their entire workforce to work from home. You know, some individuals, they could work at home, but majority of them couldn't. Again, because they don't have the technology, the home environment, the office to mimic what they had in a company location. It's hard to mimic that in a home environment. You know, there's big challenges that came with many folks that were not prepared for this.
Right.
No matter how well they thought their business continuity plan was in place, they just wasn't planning for sending their entire workforce into the homes almost overnight. I know here at AvidXchange, we have, like I said, 1,400 employees. We had to send them, probably excluding those that are already set up at home, 1,100 of them, we had to send them up in about 4 or 5 days. When we decided, you know, we're shutting down our offices, now what?
We did the same thing, yeah.
Right? So it's tough. And then we also found that there's about 1 in 5 companies that said that none of their employees had the right technology in place to effectively work from home. You know, that's a tremendous challenge as you're creating those inefficiencies, and then there's the regulatory risk, and then there's internal control challenges, but you're also putting your team members at risk by asking them to leave the house when there's probably a stay-at-home order from their state that they have to stay at home. You know, you're asking them to leave their home to do what? To go to the office because there may be some invoices that have come in and you need to make those payments.
Yeah.
And then
Risky.
lastly, what this research showed was that there's about 85% stated that automation technology would significantly help them prepare their future business continuity needs. You know, right? You know, it's something that if you think about that, a process tweaks can't fix. It's not what training can really address. You know, it's more than just looking through your current documentation on your current processes. You know, it really could only be fixed through automation, and there's really no way around that.
Yeah, it is. It's scary to think about, but I know technology is a big part of the solution. We did the same thing, right? Sent everybody home, nobody in the office, and yeah, there are a few people that had some things they had to do, but automation, and I know what we're going to talk about as we move along here, ways to make that better, and not just for today. I mean, yeah, it's paramount in this situation, but I think as we talk through this conversation, we're actually looking at a way to make it better when we're out of this thing, or at least back to the new normal, as we like to call it. So I think I'm curious. I'm interested in what you've learned, you know, during the process of pivoting, you know, AvidXchange, and as we have too at E2B, our employees to work remotely. You know, what advice you have, and we can offer to other companies that are going through the same thing, and still are. I mean, and are going to for probably quite some time. Based on what we saw at the beginning, a lot of those, at least like we saw, half the companies aren't going back maybe for 45 to 60 days.
Yeah, that was surprising to see that so many companies are not planning.
Yeah.
You know, AvidXchange, there's nothing on our drawing board to have all the employees go back anytime in the near future.
Right, ours either, yeah.
So I think is when you ask that question, you know, it really starts, what we found, it really started with a fundamental question. That fundamental question, and this question surprised us. And we, not only internally, but when we end up speaking to other customers, the question that we end up asking is like, do your employees even have internet access at home?
Yeah.
We found, you know, we make that assumption that everyone has it. It was the wrong assumption that we made. It's not that they may not have internet. It's more, do they have the bandwidth? Do they have enough bandwidth coming into their house? They may have internet, but they don't have the bandwidth where now you got maybe the husband and wife both working at home. Both of them now are online using up some bandwidth. They may have a couple of kids now who were in school. They're all now home, right? They're doing homeschooling. So you got maybe 4 or 5 people on bandwidth coming in the house that was really only designed for maybe 1 or 2 people. You may have one of those kids streaming videos during the day, and you got one of the parents trying to do their work. So that was a big learning for us, was just asking who has, not as much who has internet, what type of internet do you have, and do you have the bandwidth that will be required for you to really continue with the job that you're trying to do when you're moving from a work environment to a home environment. You know, after you confirm that they have the right bandwidth, the next question we found that you have to ask is, do they have the right computing power to really perform their job function day in and day out? You know, many times there will be pockets of employees that have desktops in the work environment and not laptops that are obviously easier for someone to pick up and take home with them. But these desktops, you know, they're secured to their desk. You got the monitors locked down as far as on the monitors. I know at AvidXchange, all of our monitors are on the retractable arms. So we had a lot of employees asking, how do I take my computer? Can I take those monitors home with us? And that stumped us for a second. And we said, yeah, you could take them back, but just imagine all the effort that is required to disassemble that workstation that is in a work environment and then try to bring that to someone's home environment. So, and then you have to quickly do a quick inventory of where all your technology gaps are. You know, how do you mobilize every single person in your organization to have access to Wi-Fi? Do you enable them with Wi-Fi hotspots? You want to make sure that they have the right computing power as well. You know, for us, and probably for you, Frank, as well, you know, you have customer care people working on your staff. You got to ensure when they're making those calls from home, you know, which many of us, you know, you do, we do at AvidXchange, but a lot of people on the calls as well today, they have these customer care reps that they're speaking to clients on a day-to-day basis. What you need to know is, do they have a quiet space in their home where they can have quality conversations with their customers, but also with their other team members? So that's something that 4 months ago you never had to worry about. Our customer care reps, we have about 400 or 500 of them. They were all in an office. Now they're handling those calls at home. Kids are at home. How many times have we been on video conference calls recently where we see the kids come into the, you know, the view of the screen? I think it's 4 months ago, that was faux pas. That was probably the worst thing that had happened. Remember that video that was on the internet where those kids came in on that gentleman who was doing a conference call? Now, it's normal. I don't think it's looked down upon if you see a kid in the background or someone walk in across their living room or kitchen any longer. It's acceptable. And I think that's a change we're seeing. And then there's some basic questions you got to also ask is, you know, what about headsets for all the employees that are now working home? You know, what do you do about webcams? We never had to worry about webcams when we were working at home. You know, people that may have had laptops, but for now that everyone's bringing maybe desktops back to their home environment, although you don't have built-in webcams like laptops. Now we have to procure webcams for everyone, get those installed. So there's a lot of things that you have to take a look at when you're moving your employee staff from a work environment to a home environment. You know, we found out really quickly here at AvidXchange, really like within about 24 hours, where we discovered our technology gaps for our teammates. You know, thankfully we have a very deep partnership with Microsoft, and we were able to really fulfill our technology gaps in the hardware and on the software side in about 48 hours. I mean, imagine that, trying to procure about 400 laptops. It took we probably got the first wave, about 200 in the first few days, but we had everyone up and running with hardware and software where they were able to be functional in a home environment within probably, I would say, about 5 working days. I mean, it was a big effort from our IT team, but it's something, it wasn't a nice to have, it was something we had to do. And what we found is that, you know, employees are expecting their home environment literally to mimic their work environment in far as technology. If they had multiple monitors at a work environment, they expect to have those same type of assets in a home environment. You can't expect someone to now work just off of their laptop. They could. They're just not going to be as productive. I know personally, I work off of 3 monitors. I can't imagine if I had to go to using just a laptop. It would bring me to my knees. It's just not how I work. I've been working with multiple displays probably for 10 years. And for a company to say, oh, here's a laptop, go at it, it'd be very, very hard. And the whole idea is you want your employees to be as effective as they can be working now at home, because your business still has to run.
Yeah, I can relate. I mean, I know that, we had a lot of remote people, but it's interesting. The customer care people are the most unique ones, right? They're on the phone all day, headsets. I think a
Exactly.
lot of transition to, remote access and webcams, and that was the big deal. And it's interesting you talked about whether or not someone has the internet in their house. That's the first question. Maybe they do, or the bandwidth. We went through the same things, and I was on vacation when this hit, came back, and I haven't been back to the office yet, and that was in March. So it's
Right.
but I got all my equipment, and I needed the same thing, multiple monitors and that type of thing. So it is crazy, but we've been able to do it. So in terms of you guys, what was that process like, moving your teams to working from home? Did it work easy for you? I mean, was it smooth? And what kind of, yeah, it sounds like you had the right technology, but maybe, whether or not you were ready for it, that's the question.
Yeah, I would say it went relatively smooth. Like I stated earlier, we probably got everybody up and running within about 5 days, and that's unbelievable as far as that timeline. We weren't prepared for it. I mean, would a company our size just have 500 laptops sitting in the back storage room? No, that wouldn't be prudent on our side. But again, because of those relationships we have with some of our suppliers, we were able to procure what we needed. It's really interesting, and something we all quickly learn that some companies that you think about, some companies that have a work from anywhere policy in place, they are way ahead of the game compared to companies that did not have that type of policy where they allow their employees to work from home. Those that had a work from anywhere policy already in place, they were far ahead of majority of the companies out there. Just a few weeks ago, we would think typically, that work at home policy, that was really a benefit to an employee. They wrapped around a quality of life for that employee where they were able to work at home. You think about it today, that's really should be part of your business continuity plan. Mm-hmm. Having your employees having that ability to work from home. So, really the challenge moving forward is really changing that mindset where that work at home policy is no longer to be looked out as a benefit to an employee as much, but more it's a way to ensure that your business can continue its operation during a time we have to, like we are going through now, or in the future if we go through another pandemic, say in the winter or sometime next year.
Right.
Other things that we want to stress really is around the communications and the collaboration. I think that is one big learning that we found. And like I was saying around the collaboration, at AvidXchange, we used a really, probably the top well-respected video conferencing provider for chat and video. But we found very quickly that they were getting overwhelmed as far as the amount of traffic coming over their network. It brought them down to their knees. So if it brought them to their knees, you know what happened to us. We had to continue with our business, and we are on the calls and video conferencing. We had to switch technology providers so we can continue with the stable communications, not only internally, but also externally to our customers. It was eye-opening across the board. We thought we had the best in class as far as this video conferencing and chat provider, but just because, again, everyone in the country is now working at home, everyone's trying to dial into their lines. They just didn't have enough phone lines. They just don't have enough bandwidth. And you saw companies such as Zoom. Who used Zoom 6 months ago? Yeah. I never used it, right?
Yeah. No, we saw the same things here. And I think as technology companies, maybe we had a little bit of an advantage because we were leveraging some of these technologies already. But I've seen it across the industries. My wife is a professor and holding classes remotely with Zoom, never having used Zoom before, never. And I can't imagine learning curve for a lot of people. Preparation is everything. And as you were talking about, communication, which is obviously the key in all of this, and use the great word collaborate. I know that we have daily huddles that we had actually started before this, just to keep communication amongst things like sales and marketing or consulting or management teams. What are some of the best practices that you guys are leveraging or that you recommend for bringing the teams together, especially we're all working remote? I mean, that's the real world.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Number one by far is communication. Communication is the key, and that communication can be weekly. It could be daily with maybe even the smaller teams. I think what you'll find is early on when you start these communications with your team, when they first start working at home, a lot of the questions are going to be around how the teammates are surviving working at home. Are you having issues with internet, or what are those issues? What are some of those workarounds? How do you, use this new video conferencing platform? So initially, you're going to see a lot of questions around that. Shortly, what we saw, even internally here at AvidXchange, is we went through that period where those calls that we had for all the employees, those were the questions. How are you doing? How are you feeling working at home? Now, those questions have flipped on the other side, where now we're talking about discussions around the day-to-day of running the business itself. We've transitioned away from how are you doing, can you work at home? Everyone has adjusted to that to a degree. There's some people that still haven't adjusted completely, but now it's more of a normal. We have the technology in place. That was key. We had to do that first for them to be comfortable. If we didn't have the technology in place, would they be as comfortable working in home as they are now? Obviously not. They would be worried they're not performing the way they should be. So give them the tools so they can be as effective as they were in the work environment. Here at Avid, we really put team communications first. It's literally one of our core values, which is win as a team. So, Frank, like you, we do a daily huddle at about 4:45 every day. We do a company stream to the entire organization. And what we're doing is really during the day, we're collecting all this information from all the employees so we can share it at the end of the day to really help drive employee engagement. We're trying to understand what employees are going through and asking them during the day. So at the end of the day, when we come together as a company, we could share all the wins, all the activities, and all the positive things that all the employees are doing at the end of the day. Matter of fact, about a few weeks ago, we actually we have a town hall meeting every quarter. We typically do it off-site. This year, obviously, we did it virtually. So we broke it out in about a 5-day period, and we brought in special guest speakers. It was only about an hour length in each day, but we stretched it out. Instead of having a town hall that was literally the entire company coming together in an off-site meeting, did it virtually, brought everyone together, brought guest speakers in. And what we found, and what I feel personally, being more connected to the company, we're more engaged with each other. Beforehand, we never used video conferencing. I would talk to people on the phone, but I really didn't see their faces because I work remote. I'm here in Atlanta. But now with everyone, I think it's almost a norm. You hear people on phone calls, oh, why don't you turn on your camera? I want to see you. So I think that's a big positive that we've seen as a company, I've seen personally coming out of this crisis. You ask what's one good positive? I think we're going to see that adoption. I can't imagine going back to not having a camera. I know today is an exception, and sorry about that.
Yeah.
But I do see going forward, always using that video camera going forward.
I echo that, and that is great. That's great conversation and advice, and I agree. I think, we have huddles every day and amongst the teams trying to stay connected, and I think the video comment is extremely important. And I said it. If you're in an office, you're a large organization, and we are, but again, our offices aren't next to each other. So getting up from your desk to walk to someone's office, because I truly believe that interaction is important face to face. Video is the way to do it. If I was in the office, I would now, whether it's Teams or Zoom or whatever is used, is use the technology we have, and we're face to face. I mean, I'm looking at a nice picture of you. You had your hair cut. I finally was able to get mine cut. I said, poor people watching these webinars have seen the transition in my my look and appearance over the last 2 months. But I think it's valuable. I mean, there's a reality to seeing someone live and talking to people versus just doing it. So that's great advice. And I think part of what we wanted to talk about here today is in terms of automation. I know on what we do, in the ERP and accounting space, technology is huge, and SaaS solutions are very much a part of what we're doing today with Sage Intacct and other products. But I know in your case, there's automation plays a role in how they maintain their operation. So I'm curious, and I know it leads to the bill pay conversation. What your thoughts are about those. What are the challenges that you're seeing from that perspective around keeping your operation running?
Yeah, I think it's really broken out in 3 areas. First is moving organizations away from this manual process on the front end.
Yep.
Getting those invoices, having your suppliers being able to send you invoices electronically. Secondly is what we spoke about earlier, is working from home. These two are huge, and the communication strategies that you end up crafting. What's key with that is when you're communicating with the team, you discover what's working quickly, and you can share those wins quickly over time. But on the flip side, you also discover what's not working, and you can make those adjustments, and you can address them as quickly as possible. And then the third challenge, really the change we're seeing in the marketplace itself, is really around this bill pay, and that's a big challenge for many, many organizations.
Yeah, so here we are, the $64,000 question. I see it on the screen. What is the bill pay challenge? So is it a huge problem? I mean, how big of a problem do you think it is in terms of what people are experiencing?
Yep, it is. It's a very big problem. First, the assumption is you have to deal with is you got to assume the first two pieces of the equation have been taken care of. That is, working remotely, with many organizations can't. So you got to address that first. Second is we're assuming to make this bill pay challenge and to have that be successful, you got to make sure you have a second thing in line. That is, you have to be able to receive those invoices on a timely manner. So assume that these first two items, working at home remotely, has been taken care of, and being able to receive invoices, that's been taken care of. You still have to figure out how to pay those bills. What our research found was that about a third of the companies could not make really any payments if their employees could not get into the office. And then about 1 in 10 said they could not make any payments if they were strictly working from home in a home scenario compared to a work scenario. It could really be debilitating for so many organizations if you can't make those payments. You risk not paying your invoices. Today, it's not an option.
Right.
Should I pay my bills?
Right.
You just can't say, I'll pay them later. And, when I return back to the office, like we learned in the poll question, you can't say I'm going to pay my invoices 3, 6, or 9 months later, when I return. You got to figure that out in real time. But many organizations, they're just not ready. We're also finding that a little over half of the organizations said working from home would have a significant to an extremely high impact on their finance team ability to process invoice. And then what this research also showed us was about 40% said some payments would be late if they were working from home. So the question really is not, will they work at home? Because the issue is everyone is.
Right.
You got about 12% said their payments would be late. it's a huge, issue. 1 in 5 of these companies said they could operate only for a couple of weeks if cash flow was interrupted due to their late payments. But on the flip side, it's not only an issue for the AP side of the house, but also on the other side of the house, on the AR side.
Yeah.
It's also an issue for our vendors that are relying on those payments from you, to keep their business afloat.
Right.
We're relying on those vendors for our business continuity plans. So if we're late making payments to them, they can't keep their business afloat. We're relying on their services to keep our business afloat. So you can see how everything is connected, and how critical making these payments are. But we're in an environment, how do you make those payments?
Yeah. So that's the question. And you mentioned AR. We talked about that in a previous webinar. So how's AP automation, been critical to helping, obviously, people during this pandemic maintain bill pay operations? They've got to pay their bills. You said it. You can't stop paying your bills. So how does the AP automation help? That is something we're all interested in.
Yeah, we know that, many companies that are still on a manual process, they still have this challenge to work in a home environment. They're working without this automation. They're experiencing these inefficiencies. You think about it's almost impossible these days to do without it. What could they do? They can end up sending someone back into the office to find an invoice. That person may not have been someone that was, tagged as a critical worker, but they're sending them in anyway because they have to receive their invoices. So that person goes into the office. They're going through the stack of mail. They're trying to figure out which of those pieces of mail are invoices. Then they're opening it up, probably with gloves and masks on these days. Yeah. They're taking pictures of an invoices, and then they're sending it through, hopefully for some type of approval. Then you have to, once you have access to those invoices, then you got to make those payments. SMBs still pay about 50% of their payments are still done by check. So if someone still has to go in the office, so the idea of sending blank checks home and a check printer home with someone goes against every internal control that any company would have. So that's really not an option. So then you end up having to print checks. You send someone in, someone's printing off checks, and then they got to go around, drive around the city to obtain signatures for these checks. There's issues around that, just around, they're going to go to someone's house to get a signature. They're going to end up having to wait outside. Then after they get the signatures, they're going to have to go drive over to the post office and probably stand in line there. Not very efficient and not very safe for your employees. It's not going to be efficient, also putting your employees' health at risk. And you're really damaging, if you think about it, you're damaging the relationships that you're building with your vendors. Many AP departments, during these past 3 or 4 months, they're probably working with a lot of new vendors. Mm-hmm. And the first reflection that you're going to put on these new vendors is that you're going to make payments to them late. It's not a good way for procurement or your procurement team when they go back to these vendors to negotiate or trying to secure new terms with them, when their first impression that they received from you was you were late with that very first payment.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And I think as we kind of talk through AP automation, which obviously is a big focus of this conversation we're having, cash flow is huge. So, I'm guessing AP automation has a big effect, or can, on cash flow, and then kind of transitioning that into the electronic side of everything. But cash flow is what it's all about, right? So
most definitely, yeah. It's all about it's all about the money movement. Companies can't sustain if they don't receive payment in about 2 or 3 weeks. The speed of making and receiving payments, it's never been as critical as it has been today. So with a solution like AvidXchange, we could take all those manual processes out for you. we're set up to provide P.O. boxes. We're able to take those invoices, scan them digitally for you, and present them to you wherever you may be located. And then we also make available multiple ways you can execute payments to your suppliers. We could do it either we could still print checks for you. We'll print them on your behalf. We could also do it by ACH, or we could do it by a virtual credit card. So many people are still relying on checks, but today speed to cash is everything. You need to have some type of electronic payment, being that ACH or a virtual credit card. So there's multiple ways of getting paid faster when you are a vendor. But, certainly, cash flow is critical. So we also have other opportunities for the vendors if they need to improve their cash flow, like our Invoice Accelerator. So if you can't wait for your terms to receive payment, we have programs that can accelerate those payments so your vendors can receive payment quicker in electronic format.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I know we're closing in on the last part of this hour, and obviously people have a lot of things going on. Talk about the electronic invoice and payments. It sounds like that's at the heart of getting this stuff off people's desks and paper. I mean, that obviously is a big piece of it.
Yeah, the biggest thing is getting a hold of that invoice, and then those that rely on paper invoice, it's really the means of going into an office, opening a mail, like I said earlier. Then you run the risk of with your employees and how inefficient that is. It's that front-end approval workflow process that you should really take a look at first. What many of our clients, what they're doing now is the very first thing they're doing is reaching back out to their vendors and letting them know, because they're using a solution such as AvidXchange, that their process will not have to change. They don't have to send someone into their office to send out invoices. They could log on to a vendor portal and just send the invoices electronically into AvidXchange. And then for the customer, they don't have to send someone into their office to collect those invoices. They could just receive them on their computer, and they could do all the approval anywhere at any time. And what we're seeing is an improving on the vendor relationships. We're seeing adoption rates going up to about 90 to 95% of vendors willing to accept electronic payment. So that's a big plus for so many companies. Just the adoption by vendors, it's a good way to maintain those relationships. They can receive those payments a lot quicker. So if they could receive their payments, they could pay their bills as well.
Yeah, and that's helpful.
Right?
Yeah. I think, kind of wrapping things up as we move to the top of the hour and we close, just, giving you a chance to talk about some final things. I know you might have some final thoughts around some of the things that we talked about today in terms of the whole subject. So I want to make sure you had an opportunity to kind of talk through some of that.
Sure. I think probably the last thing I want to really stress about today during our call is that many companies are they're desperate to get vendors to provide electronic invoices into them because they can't receive them any other way. This crisis really created an opportunity for vendors to submit their invoices electronically to get paid faster, which enables everything else downstream to be more efficient. And then the second piece is the payment side. Checks will always be used, but they're going to be used less. You're going to see a bigger adoption with ACH and virtual credit cards moving forward. Not only do you gain the efficiencies, but also all the regulatory improvements, the internal controls can be lifted and shifted. That's a huge benefit when you move to automation.
No doubt.
Right? I think, and then the last thing I like to share is that, there's really an impact on vendors' AR departments.
Yep.
They're desperate to get paid. You think about an AR department, they are looking to get paid from their customers. But their customers' AP departments is not that they may not have the cash now. It's not that they don't have the efficiencies they may not have the cash on hand. So they're trying to hold on to their cash because they're in a cash crunch. So these AR departments are not only desperate to get paid, but they want to get paid quicker. So that usual 2% discount is now probably 5 or 7%.
Wow.
And, you know, the typical rule of thumb is pre-COVID was for about every $1 million in PO spend, there was about $50,000 to $75,000 in early paid discounts that were left on the table.
Wow.
You know, and today that's probably double or triple. So, you know, you could do the math.
Yeah.
You know, you could distinguish which organization where AP is going to move from a cost center versus to potentially being a profit center. You know, it's
Right.
really the ability to transition from a manual to an automated system. You know, it's no longer a nice to have, it's a need to have at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great information. And I appreciate it, John. Thanks for your insight. I think there was a lot of value to, you know, for those that attended today in terms of what we're all going through, what everybody's going through, but what, you know, companies like AvidXchange and what we're offering together to customers. So I know that you're offering a promotion to our customers and prospective customers for the month of June. Maybe you want to touch on that real quick as we bring this to a close.
Sure. I'll touch it real quick, and everyone on the call, if you have any questions, please reach out to EDB and they give you additional details.
Yes.
But real quickly, we have a way where you could bring our service on board, and there will be no cost to you for the first 12 months. That includes as far as our Avid Pay, so you could pay your suppliers. We could do that. We could get you up and running on our pay solution, so you could pay your suppliers in about two weeks. It's probably looking at about 5 to 10 hours of your time, relatively quickly. Just think of moving from a manual system to an automated system, and you won't see any cost for those first 12 months. So again,
Wow.
please reach out to your account executive
Yeah.
at EDB for additional details.
That is a great offer. And based on what we talked about today in terms of getting paid and wanting to get paid and being able to pay your bills and automate, it can't be more timely. So again, I really appreciate your taking time, John. It was great information.
Oh, you're welcome, Frank.
I